How Michigan fares in President Trump's new budget. Plus, MiWeek heads up north next week for the Mackinac Policy Conference. And a mother says goodbye. Our One Detroit series looking at immigration policies. Stay put. Nolan and Stephen are here, and MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Hi there and welcome to MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We are so glad that you're with us. Welcome back to the table, our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley, the editorial page editor of the Detroit News, and Stephen Henderson, the editorial page editor of the Detroit Free Press. Guys, it's good to see you.
Absolutely. Good to be here.
All right, we're rolling into the holiday weekend, and you know, when I sit down to say, gosh, what are we going to do on the show this week, I find myself recently, in the last month or two, you kind of have to just leave a window open for whatever craziness is going to happen in the next 36 hours. I mean, you look back at this week and the terror attacks in Manchester, and now the British getting a little angry with the U.S. about intelligence leaks surrounding that, and then you have news of a GOP candidate for Congress body slamming a reporter. Did you hear that audio, Nolan?
I did.
Yeah, I mean, but
I
you
bet
laugh
he wins
about
by 20
it.
points.
Oh my God, you laugh about it. But this guy who's facing, who has his election today, and he is facing assault charges right now.
Misdemeanor assault charges, yeah. I still believe he'll probably help him more than hurt him. But people don't really like us.
Well, but I think that's a bigger question or a bigger concern about what's going on right now.
He had a solid lead out there. It'll be interesting to see how that plays.
Well, and they also have early voting as well.
It's actually worse for Republicans if he wins, because then he's a story, right? Now the story continues. What happens to the charges? You give the opposition the chance to make a big deal out of this. If he loses, he just goes away. So it's sort of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, but it makes me really think about the atmosphere in which, because we are all journalists and obviously we have a certain take on it, but the atmosphere in which we're operating in doing our jobs, and what the perception is of what we are doing our jobs, and how, I guess, lawmakers feel that they can respond in that way.
Well, yeah, and you know, there's, as I said, people don't like us all that much, but we don't help ourselves all that often.
How do you say, how do you mean that?
Well, I mean, this was an ambush. The guy was there to do an interview with another outlet, was preparing to do it, and the guy appeared out of nowhere and started shouting questions. He appeared as much activist as journalist in his questioning, and the guy told him 2 or 3 times. Now, nothing excuses his behavior, and you got to worry about somebody who can't control himself, but this wasn't like you scheduling an interview with someone and he attacks him, or approaching someone in a civil manner. Guy walked up, started shouting questions at him, and wouldn't be deterred.
That's a really interesting that was your perception of it, because when I heard the audio,
listen to the audio.
Guy, he had
really
such a low
different.
tone. He's like, so, you know, I just want to ask you, because it was the House Budget Committee came out talking about the fallout of what the Republican health care would be, and this guy had been very vocal in saying, I want to hear what the numbers would be coming out of the budget office. So he wanted to ask the question, and knowing that there wouldn't be a lot of time, and he said, well, no. Later he said, look, there's not a lot of time. Can I just get your response to that? So my perception of it didn't sound ambush.
No, it was not. It wasn't. I mean, this is the way, this is the lie. And we need to start saying that. This is the lie that his campaign is putting out. I mean, there's all kinds of irresponsible behavior that candidates and party operatives are indulging in right now, and part of it is about not telling the truth. This was nothing like any sort of ambush. He went up and you know what? Asking somebody a question when they don't want to answer when they're running for public office doesn't really qualify as an ambush. Maybe it was.
Now I'm going to put it out there and
aggressive
say.
journalistic.
Let me put it out there and say when we ask questions that you do say, hey, do you have a couple of minutes for this? And there is a give and take of either look, we'll answer your question in about 10 minutes or something like that.
And when he says, I'll get back to you in a bit when I'm done.
So here's my concern. Here's my concern.
I think that's a legitimate response.
If you look at the time, I mean, so there's nothing new about the idea of the press being disfavored in American culture, right? There have been periods of time throughout history when the press was labeled an enemy and when people acted on that label. Think of the civil rights movement. Think of the journalists who were killed covering the civil rights movement in the South because white racists said, these are enemies of the state. I don't want to answer those questions that you want to ask me about the civil rights movement. I don't want to ask you to answer those questions about Jim Crow.
Are you saying that we're in the same dangerous
well, it's not a usually.
Territory?
It is the same. What is the issues today are different, but the rhetoric is exactly the same. You have the President of the United States labeling the press an enemy of the state. I mean, and everyone just sort of blows that off. That's the way we have been in previous times where journalists' lives have been in danger.
Let me ask you this, Nolan. Do you believe that members of the Republican Party and leadership should come out and say something against this guy, or say something in any way for or against?
Well, I think certainly I think the Republican Party should say we don't accept this kind of behavior. I don't think every Republican needs to stand up and say, oh gosh, I think that's a little bit absurd. Every time something happens, every Republican has to answer for somebody else's bad behavior.
Fair enough.
I think you're responsible for your own behavior. I think the party should disavow this behavior. But again, the voting is when.
I think it's
so taking place today, right?
Yeah, today. So we'll know a little bit more. All right. Well, we have a full show coming up, and here's a look at what's coming up for you on MiWeek. We will talk the Mackinac Policy Conference. It's the biggest gathering of the most influential people around the state of Michigan. We'll debate what the biggest problems to solve will be. Plus, President Trump's budget has a big ripple effect on Michigan, why both Democrats and Republicans have concerns. And following one woman's countdown to deportation. It's a One Detroit story that's in depth on immigration, and that is all coming up for you. But we are starting with a look ahead at tackling some of the biggest challenges Michigan is facing. The Detroit Regional Chamber puts on the Mackinac Policy Conference every year for state leaders, from politicians to CEOs to educators. Sandy Brua, the CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber, talks about the focus of this year's conference.
We're looking to the future. And one of the things that is going to impact Michigan more than just about anything else is the advent of big data and the autonomous vehicle and connectivity. So we're going to talk about that and what that means for Michigan's future, because if we're not overly competitive in that space, our economic future in Michigan is going to be a challenge. So that's theme number one. Theme number two is closing the opportunity gap. We have 90,000 open jobs in the state of Michigan right now, but we still have swaths of our citizens that are underemployed or unemployed. Why is that? Because we have a skills gap. So we've got to close that opportunity gap. That's theme number two. And our third theme, and we think we can solve this in about a day and a half, is restoring civility in American politics.
Let's hope. You think it's going to take a day and a half?
Well, I mean, maybe 2 days. No, I mean, this is one of the biggest issues in our society today. Is how do we talk to each other again? How do if you're on the left, how do you talk to someone on the right? Because, for someone who's been in politics my entire life at the national level, what always struck me is that our end goals are always the same. We want more jobs, we want a better society, we want a better environment. Just the path to get there differs. But just because our path differs doesn't mean we can't talk to each other, we can't respect each other, we can't learn from each other. And that is something that in our society today we've moved away from.
Detroit Public Television has been covering the Mackinac Policy Conference and streaming it live so everyone around the state can see it for the past 6 years or so. So I love when we always go up here and we're able to kind of take the pulse of where Michigan is right now. And let me start with you, Nolan. What do you expect to hear, and what are, I think, maybe some of the biggest topics of conversation? I've got a little bit of a list here that I've made. But what do you sense that are going to be the biggest topics of conversation about Mackinac next week? Well,
I think the schools and education get a lot of attention. I know I think Vidi's going to be up there, the new school superintendent.
Yeah, he will be.
That was sort of unexpected. So I think there'll be a lot of discussion about what the business community needs to do to assist him or help him, or if there's anything they can do to help the school district. I mean, remember, this is a business conference, and so these, everything that's discussed will be coming from a business perspective. And so the engagement of the business community with the schools, they've been burned many, many times in that regard. I can remember years ago when Mike Duggan was deputy county executive. He went up there and made a big pitch for all these business executives to adopt a school and what have you. So these folks have been through this over and over, but this is a new day and a new person, and we'll see how he plays up there.
And I think also expansion from not just looking at Detroit schools, but also statewide as well.
Yeah, no, and one of the pillars is increasing economic opportunity for people who have been left out. You can't talk about that, I think, without talking about how badly we fund schools in the state of Michigan, how poorly we manage schools in the state of Michigan, how far behind we are other states in trying to make up some of these gaps that exist. And there are several panels that are going to look specifically, I think, at those issues.
I think it's also interesting when Sandy was talking about the civility in politics, and we did joke about, well, we can solve that in about a day and a half, but it's going to take a lot more. I think an interesting way to have that discussion of, gosh, how can we all get along, Nolan?
Well, I mean, that's always been a civil environment up there, and I mean, it's conducive to it. You have a lot of conversations going on the porch and informally. Steve and I are going to be working on it Thursday night at our big bourbon party that we hold up there.
That always makes things go a little more smoothly.
And, it's one of the things you do up there to try to bring people from various places, bring them out of their comfort areas and put them together with other people. And,
well, maybe listening to people that have
socialize.
different point of view and have them maybe stop and listen for.
Well, that's one of the values of the conference.
A couple of unofficial items on the agenda, and I think that people are going to be talking about, is looking at the governor's race for 2018. Stephen, give me an idea of what you think the conversation is going to be. We know that Brian Calley has some sort of announcement coming out on Tuesday.
Yeah. I don't know.
Wonder what that's going to be.
I don't know. I think you think it's that he's going to run. I think it might.
He's definitely going to run.
I guess he's going to run. I don't know. I would like to see Brian Calley in the race. So I think that's actually a good thing. I think it's always good to have a good primary, going into these things. And I think he's a really interesting contrast to Bill Schuette. The Democratic side is also getting more interesting, far more interesting, with Mark Bernstein, who is a close friend of mine, someone I've known for about 30 years, really thinking seriously about doing this, and I think that changes the picture on that side pretty dramatically if he gets in.
Well, if he is thinking seriously about it, and I believe he is, I know he's starting to put together some pieces of at least the start of a campaign. Yeah. He needs to be on that island this week.
Oh,
he can't cede the island to her. Yeah. And if you're going to run for governor next year, you need to be up there this week.
Yeah.
Okay, a couple of agenda items as well, or things that are happening in the legislature right now that I want to talk to. Teacher pensions. There's been a conversation up there as well, and also a part-time legislature seems to be. There's a lot more conversation happening around that. Nolan, I'm going to toss that over to you. What do you think is the
there does seem to be some impetus for a part-time legislature. Bill Schuette wrote a piece in our paper yesterday, I think, talking about the need for that. It doesn't work unless it's tie-barred to repeal of term limits, or at least a lengthening of term limits. The worst thing you could do is have a part-time legislature and a term-limited legislature, so you really have amateur hour up there. I think they need to be looking at both of these measures, and I don't think you can do that through the legislature because they won't touch term limits. It looks too self-serving. So I would rather see a proposal that tie-barred the two. Teacher pensions, I mean, it's got to be done. There's got to be a fix to teacher pensions. They're consuming every year more and more dollars that should be going in the classroom. There's $26 billion unfunded liability. We got to look out to the future and see how to get ahead of this. And the most sensible option is to say, if you're coming in as a new teacher, we're putting you into a 401k style pension plan and do whatever bonding you need to do.
And we're going to pay you
there.
less than you would make in another state, and we're going to treat you as if every problem that we have in the schools is
So
your
you're
fault.
saying it's going to make everything look more unattractive.
Teacher salaries are
Why would you take a job teaching in Michigan? I mean, there's almost no incentive now, and now you're going to wipe out yet another one. I mean,
10
this is
payroll
going in the opposite direction. It's not top 10 when you look at urban districts like Detroit and things like that. The places where it matters.
All states have urban districts. Well, most states
but the places where it matters that you attract, that it's more difficult to attract the highest caliber teachers, we offer the least incentives. And as long as we're doing that, we can't even talk about whether we're going to get to a better space. I mean, this is part of the problem with the rhetoric in Lansing, is that it is always about, let's find the cheapest way to do whatever it is we need to do, as opposed to let's focus on the quality of the outcome first, and then figure out how much it costs. And we've got that upside down.
Ninth highest in the country in education spending per student, 44th in performance. You know, there's not that direct correlation between money and performance. So we're proving
the best schools that turn out. You know, it just absolutely galls me when wealthy people like us sit around and talk about how cheaply you can educate kids. How much did you spend per student on your kids? How much do I spend?
Highland Park was spending $20,000 per kid.
Most of that wasn't going into the classrooms. That's one of the reddest herrings you guys trot out. That's a lie. They weren't spending $20,000 a year educating the kids. The district was set up in a way that money was going to things that weren't educating kids, and that was the problem.
That money was being wasted, which,
what are the schools,
which shows you that it's not all about flooding districts with money.
You write all
set up better processes.
Yeah. Okay, you write all the time about Cristo Rey, great school in Southwest Detroit. How much do you think they spend per kid? How much do you think it costs per kid to educate kids there? I'm a big fan of Loyola High School in Detroit.
I know those kids are in work-study programs. They pay tuition.
Right. You know how much it costs? It's between $15,000 and $18,000 per kid at that school. Loyola High School in Detroit, also graduating all its kids, sending all its kids to college, just like Cristo Rey, $18,000 a kid. You know why?
University Prep, $9,000 a kid, less than the Detroit Public Schools, producing better results.
They are not producing better results than Cristo Rey or Loyola.
They absolutely
are not.
Steve.
That's not true. And they're not dealing with the same population.
Hang on, I think you'd have also people arguing saying and see what they're actually spending the money on.
Loyola's kids are the poorest kids in the city.
Comparing those to the Detroit Public Schools, they spend less money, get better results. It's not all money.
The idea that you can solve the problems that poor kids bring to school without money is a lie. It is just a lie, and you perpetuate it.
As is the argument that you can solve the problem
only with money. No, I've never made that argument.
That's what you're saying.
No, it's not. I'm not. I've never said that it's only money. What I've said is that we've never tried it with money.
But you want to give the money first with no accountability, no structure.
The one thing we've never tried. No one said that.
We see that all over the country where that's been tried.
How are you ascribing that to me?
You've got to have better processes.
Have I ever said anything like that?
Yes.
When?
Today. All you've talked about is money. All you've talked about is money as the answer.
Nolan, I've written for years.
I've covered
education for 25 years.
As have I.
At the national level in 4 different states, I have always talked about the importance of accountability in schools. Look at what I've written over the last 3 years in Detroit.
And if you give the money before the accountability,
no one's talking about that. The issue is you don't want to give any of the money.
We just freed up the state $1,300 per pupil in Detroit. By wiping out the debt.
Okay. So now we're at $9,000. Now we're at $9,000 a kid.
Plus all the federal money that comes in Detroit. Way more than $9,000.
All right, guys.
Well, when you send your kids to those schools, I'll listen to you about that.
There's a lot of reasons
you
I
did.
wouldn't send my kids.
Well, exactly.
We're going to wrap it up. We're going to wrap it up right there. We were going to talk about President Trump's budget. We didn't get to that. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit as the budget process keeps going on. Well, finally tonight we are following the story of Maria Juarez, a woman living in Southwest Detroit and facing deportation. We called this One Detroit series 21 Days to Exile to give our viewers a sense of this process playing out in real time over the last few weeks. But now it is just one day. Maria is set to be deported on Friday, May 26th. She was brought to the U.S. when she was just a baby. Now she's married. She has a son of her own. But her case is not typical. She committed crimes when she was a teen. And though she's changed her life and appealed to stay in the country, she has few options left. This is not a simple case. advice, but it is a look inside of a complicated system, how the policies of different administrations can change, and what deportation can do to a family. This story is also being reported by our partners with the Detroit Journalism Cooperative. Chastity Pratt-Dawsey of Bridge Magazine picks up the story from here.
We are talking about deportation, we're talking about immigration, how complicated the stories are that involve the people who are at the center of these debates.
We've been following Maria Garcia Juarez's story for the last 3 weeks, from the time she heard she'd have to go. She's 23 years old, leaving behind a husband in Southwest Detroit who's waiting for a transplant to treat his leukemia, and a 1.5-year-old son with medical issues of his own. Juarez has not been to Mexico since she was a baby, coming to the U.S. at just 8 months old.
I don't know if it's gonna help me much, but I definitely don't mind sharing my story and, letting people know that this is not okay.
Maria Garcia Juarez is getting ready to leave for Mexico this week as she faces deportation.
My life is set here. I do not know the first thing about Mexico.
Juarez's problems go back to when she was a juvenile, using drugs and stealing cars in Salinas, California, a town where gangs and crime are a way of life. Since coming to Michigan more than 5 years ago, her record has been clean, something of a model citizen.
A lot of us are in a place where our grandparents and great-grandparents really went through years and years and years of personal ordeal to get legal in this country. And for folks out there to be saying, Trump is evil, the Republicans are evil, they hate immigrants, that's a bunch of malarkey.
Let's take one more call here. Daniel in Detroit.
She broke the law. But at what point do we get a handle on this illegal immigration in this country? I didn't vote for Trump, but I'm all for getting a handle on this because it's completely out of control.
It was nice talking on the radio, sharing my story. It's just sad that, I get this responses that people just still don't understand the reasons why. And I know that matters to immigration. They just care. You did it, you're illegal, get out.
What is it, 11 million people in this country illegally right now?
If you look at what's happened over the last 8 years, we're at the lowest level of people coming here illegally in decades. This idea that there's a crisis now, I think, is somewhat manufactured. I guess I'd also make the point that perhaps the crisis is fueled by immigration law itself.
We've learned with this story, immigration law is complex. Getting more legal opinions is recommended in cases like Maria's. With just a few days left before deportation, she managed to find 2 more immigration lawyers to take a last look at her case.
Something that did come up in both conversations with both attorneys, they asked me, why didn't I apply for DACA? And I told them every attorney has advised me not to, which I went through maybe 4 or 5 attorneys that had advised me not to go through DACA. I did not qualify.
And that's the means by which she could stay because she was brought here as a child.
Because she was brought here as a kid, yeah.
They both told me you still can apply. As far as they'll deny it, there's always a risk. They could, deny it due to their discretion. But under the law, you are still eligible. Because the law says, juvenile adjudications, because my things were not convictions, they were adjudications. So it's like under the law, it says that juvenile adjudications do not have immigration consequences. That's exactly what it says in the book. So both attorneys said it is worth a try.
With the clock ticking, Juarez now has her hopes riding on her immigration officer.
I went on Friday morning, I handed over the letter, and she told me, she said, I'm not going to see anything until I see the paperwork.
So she's giving you an opportunity to file the emergency stay.
As far as, her reaction and what I interpreted, yes, she's giving me an opportunity because she would have said no. And from my understanding, as long as it's submitted, if it's pending, I cannot be deported until they make a decision on it, as far as I understand.
Even with the emergency stay, Juarez doesn't expect it to last long, maybe a week, a bit more or less, before Immigration and Customs Enforcement says she has to go. But then again, ICE could find in her favor, and she might not have to go anywhere. It's a long shot, but that's what she's hoping for. The stay doesn't work. What does Friday look like?
So Friday, I have ICE is meeting me at the airport at 6:30 in the morning.
Still have the tether?
Yes, they said they will remove it at the airport. There's going to be some officers there waiting for me. They'll walk me through security. and they will remove my tether as soon as I board the plane, and they would wait until the plane departs. They're gonna wait, I say goodbye to my family, and they wait till my plane departs. And if for any reason the plane would, do an emergency landing, whatever, they would get notified. So they definitely don't, she's like, we don't leave until we see the plane go.
And we will keep updating Maria's story for any last-minute changes and to chronicle her goodbye. Come back to MiWeek.org. We'll have it there. Plus, you can see all of the earlier stories that we have done with Maria, explaining more in depth her legal situation and the choices that she has made. And as we told you earlier in the show, MiWeek is heading to Mackinac. Don't worry, we'll bring you back some fudge. We're covering the conference during the day and online, so you can see everything at MiWeek.org and on Facebook Live. And then settle in at 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday night. We'll have a special MiWeek each night, catching you up on all the big news and the conversations from Mackinac Island. That will do it for us. Have a great holiday weekend, and we will see you from Mackinac Island next week. Take care.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.